Thank you for coming. Welcome. Lizy should be here momentarily if she isn't already in here. Lizy, if you're in here, jump in. But I apologize for the name mix-up. We will get that figured out. So why are we doing this today? I think the main reason that I chose to do this today is there's just so much confusion, so many opinions out there, as you know, on what's going on with these NAR commission lawsuit discussions all over the internet. The media has run with it, obviously, and I don't know about you guys, but I've gotten a significant amount of questions, not so much from clients, but just people. I mean, I was playing golf with someone on Sunday, and when the guy asked what I do for a living, I said I'm in real estate, and his question was, so I heard you guys aren't going to get paid anymore. I mean, so it's out there. A lot of people are talking about it. Obviously, there's a lot of rumors floating around. One of the biggest rumors that has come out is regarding the whole Fannie and Freddie thing. So I wanted to bring Lizy in. Oh, Lizy's here under Kristen. Hey, Lizy.
Hi, guys. Sorry. I'm having technical difficulties, so I apologize for being late.
You're not the only one. I'm having them too. But anyway, I wanted to bring Lizy in to talk about that. But what I wanted to spend some time talking about today is just kind of my feelings and thoughts and share some ideas of what I've done with my past clients, what I've been coaching people to do, some script type things and things to talk about. But before I get into all that, I wanted to kind of talk about where we've been with this lawsuit, and kind of where we are today and where I think we're going. I'm not the resident expert on justice department related issues and lawsuits. None of us are attorneys, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn last night. But I really, though, I do listen to a ton of webinars and listen to a lot of thought leaders in our industry to get some ideas of where this thing is going. And what I've done is just taken some notes from various people that I respect in the industry, of some ideas and thoughts and things to work on now, just to give you guys something to think about and to start working on. The biggest thing to remember in this is we don't have a final solution yet. We don't have, anything from anyone yet that says this is how we're going to do things specifically. We've got a lot of general ideas of what's going to happen. I mean, I personally think that there are going to be changes in July. We don't know the extent of those. I've talked to Lizy. I've talked to other lenders out there that are kind of in the same boat when it comes to Fannie and Freddie and VA and everything else, that, we're all trying to get out in front of this thing and start working on some things that will help us when that final determination is made on how we're going to do things. But in the meantime, we need to think about kind of why we're here and start working on some things that will help us make that transition easier. When you look at where we've been with this lawsuit, it seems like it changes every week. Everything seemed to be pretty set in stone with the offer that was made, so to speak, that was agreed to, but hasn't been agreed to by the judge, which basically said, two things. Number one, we can't put our commissions in the MLS anymore. That was the biggest one, and to me, that is not such a huge deal, and I'll explain in a while. But when you look at how we got here, your typical consumer doesn't understand our value. Our typical person out there that we work with doesn't understand the value. So that's what we're going to really be focused on now in our buyer presentations. Yes, we're actually going to have to do, I feel, a full-blown buyer presentation to explain our value, because at the end of that presentation, we're going to start talking about being compensated for it. And next month, I'm already working on putting together a full-blown buyer presentation in a PowerPoint type presentation, similar to a listing presentation that I'll be teaching a class on, that you guys will actually be, anyone that attends will actually be able to walk away with that, that they can customize to themselves. I'm just right now, I'm waiting on the AAR documents, I should say, to be revised. As most of you know, they're in the middle of that right now. We all got a copy of it last week that kind of goes through some of those revisions that they're considering right now. But today I don't want to just basically teach you guys. I want there to be some discussion. Feel free to ask questions that come up. There's some issues that I want to bring up that are still not clear in my mind, to get some ideas from you guys. So I really want this to be more of a participatory discussion where we feel like we can talk about things a little more openly, okay, than we can on Facebook or some other places. Hopefully we can all learn something from this. So before I really jump into this with Lizy, just remember, guys, those of you that have joined us late, if your little video box says Holly on it, you can go up to the right-hand corner. For whatever reason, it's putting Holly's name on everyone. You can go up into the right-hand corner of your screen, click on the three dots, and change your name to what it's supposed to be. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat. That's what Holly's actually here for today, is to kind of see if there's any questions that come up, so that Lizy or myself can address them, or again, open it up for discussion for you guys as well. So before I jump into everything, Lizy, why don't you kind of hit on the Fannie and Freddie announcement that came out last week? I mean, just like everything else, there's all kinds of rumors flying around. There's people that think that is the best thing that could have happened to us, that the 3% or 2.5% commission can now be included. Then you've got some other people that say, no, that's not the case necessarily. So again, it's one of those topics that I think we still have to wait to hear what comes out of it. But Lizy, if you could maybe just give us an update, the latest on that would be helpful.
Yes. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for inviting me to come talk today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lizy Hoeffer, and I've been a loan officer in Phoenix. This is going on my 22nd year. And I did start really young. So I did start when I was 19. But to clarify on what Bob just asked, basically Fannie and Freddie came out with a statement that said that they haven't changed any of their policies and that it is business as usual. The reason that people ran with the information is because there was some thought that if the buyers were now responsible for their agent commission, then those fees would be considered an invested party contribution. And so what Fannie and Freddie came out and said was that if it's customary for your area for the seller to pay commission, then it's proceed as normal. So if your sellers are still paying commission, it's not going to be counted towards an IPC. That was what the statement said. Now, the reason that it got confusing is because people ran with that and said, okay, well, now I can just ask for whatever amount of commission or concessions and include my commission in those concessions. And concessions are separate than commissions in this case. And so concessions are limited by the amount of down payment that you're putting down. And so if you're putting down anything less than 10% on a conventional loan, you're limited to 3%. So in a scenario where a seller does not wish to pay for a buyer agent commission, so this is a seller paying for the buyer agent commission, and the buyer was responsible for it, it would come out of that 3% limit, if that makes sense. And so that's the way that it's done now. And I think that there is some confusion on, I can ask for 6% and have my commission be a part of that. Now, I did clarify with underwriting that if on the contract, it dictates, seller agrees to pay for buyer agent commission of X and then agrees to contribute X towards concessions, that would be allowed. But from my understanding is that there may be some limitations or some restrictions on if you guys are able to put that in your real estate contracts today. So I think it's still pretty ambiguous, but if you have a seller who's still willing to pay commissions, it's business as usual. And then just note for you guys that on an FHA deal, you're allowed 6% seller contribution. Anything above 10% that goes to 20%, you get 6% contributions. Anything above 25%, you get 9% seller contributions. So it is still very possible to get your concessions paid or your commissions paid through concessions. It just, if, you know, you just really want to know that about lending. And so I will send, a spreadsheet about the limit, you know, the limits on concessions to Bob, so he can email it out to you guys.
So Lizy, I have a question on that. So what you're saying right now, as you understand it, it hasn't been formalized yet, or there's still some clarification we need to get on this, but as you understand it, unless we put in the contract that the seller has agreed to pay a commission to the buyer's agent, we might have a problem.
If
In other
the
words,
seller has agreed to pay the buyer's agent the way that it is now, you have no problem. If it dictates in the contract that the seller agrees to pay the buyer agent commission, you should be fine. If the seller has not agreed to pay a buyer agent commission and you are hoping that it gets covered through concessions, you are limited by the percentage of concessions per the down payment of your client.
okay, yeah, so definitely, I mean, that's just one of those things we're waiting on clarification. If we write a contract right now and I mean, obviously we aren't allowed to allude to commissions in the contract as it stands now, like commercial guys can do that. The way it stands right now is we might have a problem if something isn't adjusted in the rule that allows us to put that in the contract. Is that kind of what I'm hearing right now?
Yes. Now, the only thing that I will say is that I've seen a lot of different people have different interpretations on this. And like, I'm a big Reddit person too. And I've been like, the Reddit threads are all crazy with this. The reason it was good news is because an interested party contribution is any concessions given to the buyer on behalf of purchasing. And so this NAR lawsuit says the buyers are basically responsible for this concession. And so if the sellers agreed to pay this, this would eliminate closing costs for buyers. And that was a really big deal. So it is great news. Like this wasn't like nothing changed. Like it was a great clarification. It's just, I think what's being misinterpreted is that it's this and that. Like there's two things, like you can just get it all covered in closing costs. I think for the most part, even still today, I would say a majority of sellers, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, are still moving forward paying a buyer agent commission because they see the marketing advantages of having it, you know, I mean, the more visibility and the more attraction, you know, as a marketing fee. So I don't think that real estate has changed that drastically, but I do know that Fannie, Freddie, VA, everyone is waiting for the final ruling to come through.
Right, right. And Sally posted something in the chat that Sitzer judge grants preliminary approval. Is that, Sally, can you unmute yourself? Because I haven't read that. Did that just come out today? Oh, Sally, you there? Okay.
I'm not Sally, but I did read that today.
You did. Okay. So that must have just come out today then?
Yes,
Okay.
as far as I know.
Okay, great. Okay, well, we'll all have to get caught. Like I said, I mean, this thing changes like not just day by day, but minute by minute on what you hear. And that was kind of the purpose of this thing is to get, you know, some thoughts out there of what we're hearing. And then more importantly, you know, we know that there's changes coming to the way that we do business, especially as buyers agents. And the one thing that hasn't changed, the destination, the best way to describe this that I've used to describe to my clients, an analogy is that, you know, we're still getting people from point A to point B. The destination hasn't changed on this thing, just the route, how we're getting there. Okay. So kind of like, I've always used the analogy of when I'm talking to somebody about representing them, that it's kind of like you've hired me to fly your plane and I'm the pilot. My job is to get you from point A to point B. We're going to hit turbulence along the way. And in this case, we've got huge storms that have developed or whatever. We have to take a new path to get you to that destination. The biggest thing you've got to do as a professional out there right now is not let people get freaked out about it, because what they're reading in the news, what they're reading in the media is so different than what we know or what we feel is going to happen in this thing. This is this whole thing is a great time to kind of establish the pros versus the amateurs in this thing. The amateurs are the ones that are going to, there's an old saying that, amateurs practice until they get good, and pros practice so much that they never do it wrong. This is a time to really figure out your buyer presentation, get that thing dialed in, come up with a list of everything you do in a transaction, and remind your clients that we don't sell homes, we sell representation. Because what this thing's going to come down to, guys, is a lot of this is going to revolve around what that listing agent does with their client and how they kind of tee this thing up. You're going to have, I think, like Lizy said, I think most sellers in general and most people that are a lot smarter than me feel that sellers are still going to want to compensate buyers, agents in these transactions, but a lot of that is going to have to do with what's said in that listing presentation, as you know. Last year, NAR put out a statistic that 89% of buyers were represented by agents. So people still understand the importance of representation. We just have to remind them of what representation really means and go through that step by step with them, so that they understand the value. Because at the end of that buyer presentation, that's the tough part. That's the part where you've got to ask for your money. You have to ask to be compensated. And if you haven't done a good job of going through and reminding them or explaining to them everything you do to help along the way with a transaction, it's going to be a more uncomfortable conversation to have versus, hey, this is what you're getting from me. Okay. So you're going to have to go back and look at things like, really, I mean, go all the way down to what are my core values? How do I run my business? Okay. What are my 3 or 4 uniques? What do I do differently than other agents that are out there? Okay. For me, experience and time in the market has been a huge thing for me especially over the last 15, 20 years. I've been doing this this is my 25th year in it. So obviously when I'm doing a listing presentation or I'm talking to a buyer, one of my 3 uniques is I've seen a lot. Okay. And negotiating is like one of my strongest suits that I put out there when I'm talking to people. So, anyone have any comments on that or any ideas of, how many of you guys have been using a buyer broker so far? Just do your little hand raise. How many of you use that on a regular basis? If you're using that buyer broker agreement on a regular basis, just kind of let us know. That was another statistic NAR came out with recently. There's 18 states in our nation that require a buyer broker agreement. And last year, 59% of agents used it on a regular basis. So we've got a lot of folks out there that when this was announced, there was a lot of consternation, a lot of stress over the fact that, what it really came down to is they weren't using a buyer broker or haven't been using a buyer broker agreement on a regular basis. And I'm guilty as charged. 95% of my business comes from past clients and referrals and that sort of thing. And you can get away with not doing that buyer broker agreement a lot of times. But, you start looking at especially people that rely heavily on internet leads, Zillow, pay-per-click, that sort of thing. you know, what are we going to do? What are you going to do now when someone calls you and says, hey, I want to go show a home. I want you to go show me this home this afternoon. You've never met them before. I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have right now. And I know that some brokerages are working on a limited time, 1 day, 2 day type buyer broker agreement just to get them through that first showing. Okay. And then, you know, you've got opinions flying all over the place out there about, you know, guys saying, well, I'm not even going to pay attention to this. I'm just going to go business as usual. If someone wants to go look at houses, I'm going to do it just like I did before. And the big question that comes up is, who's going to police this? Okay. And there are some out there that think that, well, I'm just going to keep doing it and see how long I can get away with it. Well, I can tell you who's going to police it, because I've been in those conversations as when I was a managing broker at my home group, you know, answering broker hotline calls and so forth. There were a lot of times where we do get those calls that come up where it's a ticked off consumer or what have you. It's the consumer that's going to police this thing. Okay. When they get down to the wire and they don't get a house because there was a commission dispute, the first thing they're going to ask that consumer, ADRE or AAR, is, did you sign a buyer broker agreement? Was this explained to you what you were responsible for compensation wise? And if the answer is no, then, you know, now we're starting to get into problems for your license and everything else. So if anyone's telling you to just keep doing things the way they are, no one's gonna catch on. I can tell you right now that, you know, compensation is something we've got to be talking about up front as early as possible in the relationship with our clients, because if the you know what hits the fan, the first thing they're going to say is, this guy never told me I was going to be responsible for 2.5% or 3% or whatever. And when it came down to the wire, that came up and it cost me getting the house. Okay, that's where you're going to start to see some issues like that. Does anyone out there have a 1 day representation, or like I think it was EXP that came out. I saw one the other day. Any EXP agents in here that have that or have received that 1-page buyer broker, or do I have it wrong? Was it someone else? Anyone? Okay. The broker, LOL. Any questions so far on what I've been talking about? Okay. I've got some notes here real quick.
There is some, Bob, there is some commentary in here.
Okay.
So
yeah, there are some questions. Do you want me to read those out, Lizzie?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we have Lizzie, how would we know what the limitations are regarding concessions?
So I'm gonna send out to Bob just a breakdown of what loan and what down payments for, you know, have limitations on what closing costs. So it'll be like FHA limit is 6%, down payments 3.5%. So that way you guys can see it.
Okay, and so if the client is a first-time buyer, they're usually coming in with bare minimum, say FHA 3.5%, and the seller does not offer commission. Is the buyer agent out of commission altogether?
No, it really just depends on how you negotiate it. So FHA allows for you guys to get up to 6% contributions. And so depending on what the buyer has, I mean, and how their loan is structured, they don't typically need a full 6%. So you could put it into a buyer broker at that time. The only one that doesn't allow for buyers to pay concessions at all is a VA loan. But in this particular scenario that you're talking about, it would require you just to negotiate 6% seller contributions.
And then Sally was asking if the compensation will count toward the IPC buckets.
So
they don't count.
that was the worry, was that if a seller agreed to pay commission under this new lawsuit, that it would count towards the IPCs. And at the moment, it does not. They're not. If it's customary, it's the way that it is.
Lizy, what's IPC stand for?
It stands for Interested Party Contributions.
Okay.
Okay,
It's-
so Robert says it seems that AAR Forms Com is proposing a new change to the BB form, a new box. Buyer directs broker not to show listings unless broker comp has been advertised or negotiated to be paid by seller or listing agent.
Yeah, that's a really tricky one, guys. There's part of me, I'm still thinking that one through, but there's part of me that wishes that wasn't even in there. Okay, that's going to really put us in a tough spot. You know, I think the biggest wild card in this whole thing is the thought that will we have buyers going directly to listing agents? Okay, and I think that's tricky. I mean, you check that box and you say, okay, I'm not going to show you those homes. Does that still allow the buyer to go direct to the seller or the listing agent? I'm sorry.
So I think the reason that they're putting that in there is because if it is, like, for instance, right now, how I understand it is that you guys are not allowed to discuss commission, and that can't prevent you from being able to show and negotiate a contract. And so, but that also compromises the buyer to then pay for your services. And so allowing the buyer the choice, you know, to just only see properties in which there is a buyer agent compensation opens up that it's that loophole that you guys need to be able to navigate under. So that way you're not working for free. I think that there is, it's worth to discuss, guys, because there are going to be sellers that do not want to pay a buyer agent compensation, and that's just the way that it is. And so as a listing agent, I think it's really important that you guys have a strategy for how you would attract consumers, right? So is that more open houses? Is that, you know, advertisements online? Is that, you know, creating a big email newsletter? Like, what is it that you guys are going to do? I don't know that it's going to be any cheaper for, you know, the person that you're taking the listing for, but having that strategy that replaces the marketing fee that would go to a buyer's agent, I think is something that as a listing agent, you need to be thinking about right now.
Yeah, and on that same note, you know, as a listing agent, again, a lot of this revolves around what's being told to that buyer or that seller from the listing agent. How is it presented to them? You know, you're going to have agents out there that are going to use this as a way to market their services. You know, it's that bottom race to the bottom thing of how cheap can we do it? Okay, that just come out. I mean, I guarantee you, we're going to see marketing out there that says you no longer have to pay a buyer's agent. Call me to save 3% or whatever on your next deal. We're going to see it. Okay, it's just going to happen. You're going to have sellers saying, "Hey, I've heard that I no longer have to pay a commission." Okay, and I watched a role play the other day that was really good on this, where you know, the agent basically said, okay, so did you just hear this today? I mean, what about 3 years ago? Because nothing's changed from 3 years ago to today, and nothing is going to change 3 years from now. Okay, you never were forced to pay that commission. Okay, and then you start getting into you know, why the reason you're selling right now is we're at record prices. Well, how did we even get to these record prices? And it's because of demand. Okay. And what does demand create? It creates exposure. What does exposure create? It creates price. So we're going to have that conversation with these sellers and let them know that they're putting themselves at a competitive disadvantage by not offering to pay somebody to incentivize somebody to bring someone to their home to show it and sell it.
So I want to say something really quick because I think it's important. I don't know that it necessarily means race to the bottom. I think that there are some people that are still able to charge a 7% listing in this market or a 4% listing in this market. And it's because they're able to demonstrate value and articulate it so that people can know, okay, this is what I walk away with. And this is what that means to me and my family. And so like, if you were a listing agent and your seller was like, absolutely, I'm not paying this is what the new says, say, hey, great. So just so you understand what we're replacing is that this was traditionally a marketing fee. So we're going to take this 2% and here's how we're going to apply it. here's the ads that I'm gonna put on, here's the open houses I'm gonna host. It doesn't necessarily mean savings. What your listing or your seller cares about is the money that they're going to net and walk away with. And so I love opportunities where you can sell against. So the people who are going to be the cheapest option, that's fine. Like a perfect example that is not real estate related is Salad to Go as a franchise and McDonald's. If you have $1 to pay for food, McDonald's is your option. But if you have $7 and care about your health, Salad to Go is the place that you're going to go to, right? It's like we're talking 7 times more expensive than the one. And so like right now in real estate, because this happened to us, you guys, just, I mean, not that long ago, a decade ago, where all of our commissions were changed. And overnight, we had to learn how to differentiate ourselves from loan products. So if you guys can come up with value propositions that are tangible, quantifiable, and guaranteeable, like I think this is the market where you win.
No doubt. This is a market where the pros distinguish themselves from the amateurs. I mean, the pros are going to come out, explain what their value is. And a good analogy also is, when you're going to have some agents out there that it's the drug dealer versus the doctor comparison. Okay, if you're sick and you're going to go to your doctor, you're going to go through an exam, he's going to figure out what's going on with you, give you a prescription, you go to the pharmacy, you pick it up, you get better. There's always going to be people that say, oh, I'd rather just go buy it from the drug dealer on the corner, I already know what's wrong with me. Okay, and that is something you can use with your buyers. Do you want to go, I'd like to keep my license. Okay, so yes, we need to sign this agreement. This is now required by law that we have to agree to our compensation before we go show houses. Okay, I'd like to keep my career in real estate and keep my license, but more importantly, I want to make sure that you understand the process and how the entire buyer process works, including what I'll do for you to show my value in this transaction. But there's always going to be people that, if you're sick, you're going to go to the doctor, you're going to go to the drug dealer on the corner that pulls it out of his pocket, right? So it's separating the wheat from the chaff. That's what this is gonna do. We've got a perception problem out there, as we all know. I don't know about you guys, but my kids watch all these reality real estate TV shows where, they think that it's drama, fake boobs, and nice cars. And that's what a real estate agent does. And it's up to us to prove that, and go to social media, and hell, I mean, I hope none of them are in this group right now, but I look at some of the agents that are out there. I mean, it's like they're copying and emulating these reality TV shows. We've got to go out and prove our worth and our value to people if we're going to start basically saying this is what we're going to get paid. You wouldn't, if you're going to get your house painted, you wouldn't just get online, call a house painter and say, show up tomorrow and start painting it. You're going to want to know what you're paying for. Am I paying for the paint? Am I just paying for the labor? Same thing now. The big thing is the money was already determined before. It was in the MLS. We knew what we were going to get paid. Now we have to go get it from our buyers and explain to them why we deserve to be compensated for our time. I mean, go ahead.
There's some other commentary here about the
Okay.
DOJ and steering. And one thing that I also just want to caveat, because part of the reason that Fannie and Freddie did not have a final ruling on how they were going to proceed with loans is because of the DOJ still has to approve this settlement. And there is likelihood of further investigation on this and just like some general legislature on real estate commissions. So like the same thing that happened with lending is now we have this thing called the CFPB that governs lending and commissions. They haven't ruled that out. And so right now, everything is preliminary. That article that had come out today was basically just saying that the judge who ruled on this said that they thought that what NAR had proposed was fair and good. but it still has to go to trial in November, even though it comes to fruition in July. The DOJ hasn't approved any of this. So this could all just kind of go away anyway.
Yeah.
And so
I think our
everyone
biggest,
just also needs to be aware that there could just be an additional legislation on this.
yeah, I think our biggest fear right now that we all breathed a sigh of relief when the last whatever came out of this lawsuit that said this is what we're going to do. I was hoping that we didn't see it, and we didn't see it, thank God. There were people out there that thought DOJ was going to step in and say the seller absolutely cannot pay the buyer's agent. Okay. That came down to an antitrust issue. There were lawyers on both sides of this fighting, saying you can't tell sellers who they can and can't pay when they go to sell anything, whether it's a house or a car or anything else. Then you had other people saying it's DOJ, they can do whatever they want. So it does make me a little nervous and a little hesitant here that DOJ has basically re-entered the picture and let's face it, reneged on an agreement that they'd already made with NAR. Okay. And our president, not to get political, but our president coming out and saying that the other day, that basically realtors need to lower their commissions to help out buyers in transactions, didn't help much. It just goes to show you how uninformed people are. Even the top of the president of our country came out and said things that just weren't true, that came from this lawsuit. So again, it is a time to sit back and see how things play out over the next 2 months. This thing that just came out today, this thing changes.
Oh, did Bob freeze for everyone? Okay. Holly, will you message him?
Yes, I'll send him a message.
Okay. So, while Bob's frozen, just so you guys know, so like it does seem scary and there is a lot that is unknown right now, but these are all really great opportunities for us to have what's called a unique selling proposition. So it's how you articulate value in a closing. And so if what's in question is the amount of your commission, so let's say it's 3% on a $400,000 house, right? You have to articulate value that is greater than $12,000. Okay. And so just to give you a little bit of stats that are out there right now that will help you is one, in Maricopa County, the list price to sales price ratio is 97%, which means that automatically using a buyer agent will save you 3% on whatever the price of the house is. Now, those of you who have many transactions, I would compare that to, what your actual percentage of pull through is. Some agents are better at negotiating than others, right? And so if you know that the average is 3% savings using a buyer's agent, and you can save them 5%, right? 20,000 is better than 12, right? And you can say things like, look, buyers who work with me save, $20,000 on average. Or if you have fewer transactions and you can't do an average, use your median. So if you have 10 transactions and your midpoint, meaning that half was higher, half was lower, was 10,000, that's what you use. But this is a really good time, right, to really articulate how much you will save people money, or you will save them in actual cash out of pocket, or a return on their investments. So another really strong value proposition is, depending on where you sell, different areas have higher appreciations than others. I think Tina Tambor just said it was like 7.3% the other day for Maricopa County, which is really high, guys. But assuming that yours is 5%, you can say that you help people make $100,000 in 5 years or less investing in real estate, and you can guarantee it. If they don't, you'll list their home for free. Like, that's a really strong USP. So it's tangible. $100,000 means something to somebody's life, and then if you can guarantee it, it's like the full Monty.
Yeah.
You froze, Bob, so I took it down that tangent.
No, it's great. And those are the kind of things we have to think about. We have to think about what are unique. I call them the 3 or 4 uniques. What do you do that you don't see others doing in this market that you can do for your people? That's going to be the biggest thing. some buyers are going to be shocked by this when we put this buyer broker agreement in front of them. Hopefully they're not, if we spend enough time and give them good information to understand how important representation is, that you're just not a door opener. Okay.
I
You
think
are there to represent their best interests.
I think Johnny has something he wants to add to the
Johnny,
conversation.
what's up?
Bob. Hey, Lizzie.
Hi.
So there's two things I want to say. So I've been on 3 different listing appointments since all this stuff started. I tried 3 different approaches. I can tell you without question that your first question to your potential buyers should be, how much do you know about the NAR lawsuit? That's the first question. If they say, I don't know anything about it, then you've got one approach. If you've got the approach where, oh, I've really investigated and I know exactly how it's going to go, that's another way. And then there's going to be people that are going to be, yeah, I heard something about it, and like, you don't get paid on this now or something. So the solution is not, absolutely not, a sheet of paper to put in front of them. It's got to be a conversation. You have to talk this out with them, because remember, and I'm not getting political here, if you watch CNN, you get one story. If you watch Fox, you get another story. They're 2 completely answers to the same exact story. And I'm not telling you which one to choose. I'm just telling you that's a state of our country right now. So what they're hearing on the news or wherever could be completely wrong. For those agents that have been doing this for a while, if you've never used a buyer broker agreement, don't be afraid of it. Use it as a tool. It's a gift. If you can present value to these people, and you can explain exactly what's going on with this lawsuit, all of a sudden you totally own them, because now you're giving them straight scoop that's specific to exactly what they want to do. My second thing I want to say is, if you don't have a lender like Lizy and a title person and a team, you need to get one, because this has got to be a group effort. You've got to come up with the right stuff that you can leave behind with an explanation. You've got to address this thing. Don't let it just go, well, I'll handle it in July. This is actually a gift to those realtors that have been out there doing this and understand it. This is not a big problem. Nothing really changes. If you've been on the forefront of what your commission does and how it all works with your clients, nothing has changed.
Right.
Team up.
Right. One of the biggest things that will come up, I mean, you're going to get questions from buyers saying, well, why don't I just go directly to the listing agent? And it's the same question that's come up over the years for me when I'm in a listing appointment and the seller says, okay, we've got, I'm paying you 5% or 6% commission, and I understand you're going to give half of it to the other side and all that. But what happens if the buyer isn't represented by an agent? Okay, it's the same thing here. You go right into, okay, if you were getting a divorce with your spouse, would you share the same divorce attorney just to save a few $1,000s on the divorce situation? No, you're not going to do that. So, I mean, there are going to be listing agents that promote this as, just come to me and I'll handle both sides or whatever. They're asking for it. I'm telling you right now, that is of all the things that came up over the years on dealing with broker hotline issues or whatever, those were always the nastiest ones, the dual representation. Okay. And they'll say, well, you can go unrepresented. Okay. So again, would you, if you had the funds, would you go get a divorce with your husband and that has the attorney and you don't have one? No, you're going to get run over. It's the same deal. Dual representation, in my opinion, should be outlawed, but these are the things that you're going to have to counter with because this is the thought process, especially for those people, those Zillow buyers and people that feel like they can close a deal, go from contract to close by using their computer and don't need an agent. These are the ones that are going to be your biggest challenge.
And one thing as a lender, we had a client once whose house burnt down, I think it was 2 weeks after close because of an electrical box. And I only knew about it because I had to deal with the insurance check and everything. And I think about that often in all of these conversations, is about people who will go unrepresented, because it really does put so much extra liability on you as a listing agent and your sellers for disclosing correctly. You know, because if something happens, even though the buyer is responsible for getting their inspections and doing all the things, it's like, who's responsible for letting them know? And those are always like, you know, loose ends or things that people don't consider until it becomes a big lawsuit. And in that case, you know, where their whole house burnt down, at least they had a buyer's agent who recommended, you know, the inspector and all the things. And so there is that just extra level of protection for you as the agent and your sellers when there is a circumstance like that.
Are there any other questions, comments? Because I need to end this in just a minute. One thing I'm going to share with you guys, I'm going to email you I'm coached by a guy named Brad Baldwin over at Eisenhower Coaching, and he just recently did a role play with a really strong agent on a buyer presentation where she goes through her presentation all the way through her buyer broker agreement. I'm going to send that to you guys so that you can kind of watch that and get some ideas. I had hoped to play about 10 minutes of it during this, but you know, obviously there's a lot of information to discuss, and I had a feeling we would run out of time. So I'm going to go ahead and just send you the YouTube link to that for all of you that joined. Also, just so you know, this is being recorded. So once we get it cleaned up a little bit at the beginning and that sort of thing, I'll send you a copy of this so that you can go back and watch it again, grab some notes or some ideas. And then lastly, next month, like I said, I'm going to be putting together a full-blown buyer presentation, soup to nuts. Hopefully we'll have our new document, revised document from AAR, our new buyer broker agreement that we can go over and kind of role play around that a little bit and see if we can get hopefully we'll have more information and we'll get this thing dialed in before the middle of July. So, Holly, is there anyone else in here that had any last minute questions, or are we good?
I didn't see any questions, just a couple of comments.
Okay.
One was that they just helped some clients purchase their first home, and we received 6% commissions for closing cost and rate buy down. If the seller chose not to pay co-broke, there was nothing left for me to be paid. My clients could not afford to pay me themselves. This is common with most young families.
Lizy, anything on that?
I mean, people definitely feel that way. But I would still say that, you know, even if they didn't do the buy down, getting a house where you're making 7.3% return on your money means that you'll get 100% return in less than a year. And so you can't have everything at all times. And I still think that it still pays to be represented by a buyer agent in that circumstance, if that's what it comes down to.
And that, my friends, is why you use Lizy Hoeffer as your lender right there. Okay. When things kind of start hitting the fan and you're getting frustrated with what to say, what to do, Lizy is always in your corner, not just to handle your borrowers, but to work with you and give you some ideas on how to get deals done in general. So it's one of the reasons I've used her exclusively for the last 12 to 15 years and why my clients love her. So thank you, Lizy.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, guys, thank you for
Bob, real
joining
quick
us.
before you jump off, do you
What's
mind
that?
telling, before you jump off, do you mind telling people where they can connect with you, and Lizy where they can connect with you?
Yes, guys, just feel free to reach out via email, or you can call me anytime to learn more and talk more about these scripts and things that we're working on for the buyer presentation. And Lizy is pretty easy to get a hold of as well. Lizy, why don't you tell them what website again?
Yeah, you can find me online, Lizy with 1Z, Lizy, Hoeffer, Hoeffer. So, and my phone number, guys, is 480-593-4510.
All right, guys. Thanks again. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us.